Hi, my name is Ada Wells and welcome to the ProBalance PT channel. Today what we're going to talk about is one of my favorite props, and that is the towel. In this particular case, these red towels are known as Fletcher Towels, named after Ron Fletcher, who was one of the Pilates elders who actually developed it. And he used it to be able to help with alignment when he was teaching mat classes. He could actually use it as a way for the clients to be able to see what their alignment was and actually to feel what was going on in the shoulders. You can do this with any towel, but I do want to make sure I honor him because he's the one who basically developed it. And you can find out more with his stuff on a website called FletcherPilates.com. And there is a whole breath pattern and series that goes along with it, but for our purposes here, I just want to show you some simple tools that you can do with it without any fancy breath patterns, just something very basic. So once again, if you want the full version, go to Fletcher Pilates, but I'm going to give you just a more watered down version. So first of all, we want to know where we put our body when we're even going to be dealing with the towel. So if we're in a standing position, let's sort of establish where our good posture is. From our feet, we're standing as though we're standing on two tripods with the weight equally distributed between the first metatarsal head, which is just that little place right underneath the big toe, underneath the fourth and fifth toe, and then right at the heel. So basically, when you're standing, you should feel like your weight is equally distributed kind of through those points on both feet. Then you want to think about a midline going from between those arches all the way up to the top of your head. So whenever we're doing anything Pilates-wise or movement-wise for that matter, you should always be thinking about length. Thirdly, focusing on the pelvis, what we want to think about is if we were, say, to have a bolt on the front of our pelvis and a bolt at the back of the pelvis, if I were to tighten that front bolt, notice how my pelvis tips forward. And if I tighten that rear bolt, it tips backwards, so in a posterior tilt. We want to find that place kind of right in between where we're in what we call a neutral or optimal spine position. And this is usually the strongest position of your spine. If you were playing golf, you could actually have that in that neutral position, bending forward from the hips. This is actually still a neutral pelvis. So just so that you know that. Then if we move up in another segment, we think about where our lower ribs are. Now what often happens with an overhead motion, people will tend to flare their ribs out, and you'll see that whole rib ring just kind of lean forward. And that's not going to be good because that creates a lot of shearing in the low back and some faulty mechanics. So what you want to do is just make sure that if you have those jutting ribs, you really make sure that those ribs stay stacked right on top of that pelvic ring. Okay, so you got pelvis, lower ribs, and then moving up to the collarbones. I always tell people you want to have width and openness through the front of the collarbones. Watching that there's space between the ears and the shoulders. We don't want to be shrugged up in the ears, but we want to maintain that space. We're not really driving it down, but you're just maintaining just this kind of openness here, so that when you bring your arms up overhead, we're not shrugging our shoulders. This doesn't look very comfortable, but we're keeping that length, and once again, that length up through the midline. Finally, where you put your head, it's very important that your head doesn't end up in front. So sometimes people, when they bring the towel back overhead, you'll see the head jut forward. And once again, make sure that you're setting that head right over the ribs, right over the pelvis, and then standing in between on your little suction cups at the tripods of your feet. Okay, so there's your posture, quick posture screen. Then in terms of how we hold the towel, and you can do this with any 36-inch towel. I usually tell people hold it by the diagonal, kind of fold it up. That'll give you a good grip. These are braided, so that's why I have you hold it by the diagonal, because when you pull, there is a little give to it. So we're going to measure our shoulders, because we want our grip to be about twice the width of our shoulders. So we go from one end to the other end. That's going to be where I'm going to grip it, all right? Then when we look at the wrists, very important on the wrists that we don't have this sort of creased wrist here. We want to make sure that we have a strong wrist. Your test would be if you had a punching bag and you were going to punch that punching bag, would you punch it like that? No, you're not going to have any power, and you're going to injure your wrist and your elbow. So you want to think about keeping that wrist as neutral as you can, so that way if you were to punch it, you could actually generate power not only from the wrist, but also through the body, basically at the shoulder girdle, okay? So we're going to hold those wrists in a neutral position, kind of knuckles away. And what we're going to do is start by just bringing the towel up to a chest level, and you're just going to pull apart. And when you pull, you're pulling from, I tell people, the armpit muscles. And then you release it. You're going to pull and release. And you can repeat this 5, 10 times, and release, and pull, and release. I'll just do it 4 for now. Then we're going to bring it down to the hips, and make sure when we come to the hips, we're not rounded forward, but we're maintaining that posture we talked about earlier. we're going to pull and release, pull, release. We'll do that 2 more times, release, and last one, pull and release. Then we'll go ahead and bring the arms up overhead. Now once again, this is where you've got to watch that rib ring. Make sure that stays stacked and make sure your head stays over the rest of your body. And so from here we're going to pull, release, and once again thinking about pulling from the armpits and release, pull, release, one more, pull and release, and we'll bring it back down. And sometimes it's nice to do a little set of shoulder rolls in between. If you want to play around with some breath patterns, you absolutely can, and it's a nice warm-up. So what you can do, we're going to do a little inhale, inhale, exhale, exhale. So it's going to be a so one breath up and one breath down, and up and down. 2 more, up, and last one, and you can just do some rolls. So adding that breath, like I said, that percussive breath that Ron Fletcher used when he taught it, really allows you to get a little bit more oomph out of the pull, and also really preparing your body. It's okay if you do it without the breath, just that sense of just make sure that you're not holding your breath when you're moving. Another favorite place that I like to go is behind the back. So if I were to take my towel and just bring it behind my back here, I'm still keeping everything in line, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to, actually I've got it in line and I have my palms facing out, just so that you know that. And I'm also watching that my elbows are not hyperextended, but you want to have what we call parentheses arms, so that there's just that little slight bend, they're not all the way locked. Because if they're slightly bent, then you're actually able to engage from the shoulder girdle. And so from here, we're going to go ahead and just bring it straight back and down, and up and down. Okay, and notice that my ribs are staying in place as we bring it back. And if you'd like, so you can do that, like I said, 5 to 10 times, and you can bring it back and you can even pulse it. And once again, the pulsing is nicer when you do the breath with it, so I will do it. You'll go. And you can bring it down, and you can just go ahead and give yourself a little release there and relax. So that's just a few little exercises you can do with the towel. There is a whole repertoire and choreography that you can do with it, as I mentioned, with breath patterns, with changing your trunk orientation. But at least that gives you a basic just introduction. You can do some of these things lying down on a roller, and if you've looked at some of my other videos, you've seen me on arcs and rollers where I actually am pulling this towel and bringing the arms overhead. Once again, it's just a fabulous way to be able to learn how to organize, to really feel in the joint where that shoulder is in space, so that you have some sense of when you bring your arm up here, that it's just not you using your upper trap muscles and your levator muscles up here, but you actually are using some of those stabilizers down in the lower part of your shoulder. Okay, so with that, grab your towel and have fun. We'll see you next time.